clients, I'm Gemma and I'm here to show you how you can use various visual aids to communicate your Salesforce.com solution in a really visual way. I've had a situation lately where we spent ages speaking to a client and understanding their processes, understanding what they do, how it affects how they serve their customers. And we had a lot of information that we gathered over several weeks of workshops and design discussions. Now, the thing which is great, but the thing about that is that you then need to go and put that away into something tangible that the client can sign off. And that's where the challenge can come from, especially if you've got a solution in your head that has many moving parts and features. Because at that point, you've been talking about the solution in theory. They can't visualize it and they feel slightly uneasy because they can't be certain that you've actually covered everything. And certainly because you are writing all of this solution up in a big document, and people do respond to different scenarios in different ways. So some people will really learn from reading and will want to read a long document, whereas others just want to have the highlights and they don't necessarily have the time to read through a large document. And we've come across this several times in my 10-year career. So what I've ended up having to do, and I can empathise with this completely, is to provide some reassurance to the customer that what we're building has included everything that we've captured, that we've listened to what they've said, that we've actually taken the time to understand how their business in as effective a way as possible to ensure that the solution that we build works for them. I'm going to give a shout out to Taylor from Gears CRM and Sergey from Cloud for Good for asking me to record this demo and this video. And I hope that any of you who are working with Salesforce solutions and needing to design them in an easy way will find this a really useful video.
So this is a case study for unrestricted receptacles, and they're a competitor of universal containers. They've got a requirement. We've spent a number of different sessions with them working through how they will control their lead to cash process. So they've given us a number of different requirements, and this is the process as we understand it. So first of all, they use an external order system, and they have to use that for pricing. They will not use CPQ, they will not use any other system at all. They're very happy with the pricing system they have. Therefore, all of their orders are made in that system. Second of all, the sales managers are very keen on Salesforce's reporting capability, so they have mandated that all reports must be accessible in Salesforce, including order information. So the process is we have a new lead that comes in, and a business development representative, a BDR, qualifies that lead. Once that lead is qualified, they convert it, and the system automatically assigns it to a salesperson for them. The salesperson works the opportunity until the client wants to place an order. And then when they want to place an order, the salesperson raises the order in another system. They give the opportunity reference number to that system. When the order is signed, the opportunity owner gets a notification and they can go ahead and win the opportunity. When it's closed won, the system will automatically update the account type to say that it's a customer now. Sales ops will then, on a weekly basis, take all the orders that were signed in the previous week and load them into Salesforce against the opportunities that they were closed but under. The sales managers then refresh their dashboards every week and they can see a total view of their sales process and performance, including orders. So if we wanted to put this into a specification, it could take a couple of pages. It could even go up to, say, 10 or 15 pages if they wanted to load all the fields and describe the interface in prose. And that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely something we would need to do because it needs to be mapped against the scope that we've defined with the customer to begin with. But in order to make this a more engaging experience for the customer, this is how I would typically approach this kind of scenario. So I'm in Lucid Charts at the moment, and I have got several different diagrams that I've already put together. So we have a very simple, straightforward entity relationship diagram, and this basically explains to the customer, if I create a lead, I then go ahead and convert it, and it produces an account with a contact and a contact role and potentially an opportunity. But in their process, that's what they will do. And this is indicated by me using the arrows in Lucid Charts just to show that conversion process and then labeling it accordingly. What this also shows is how all of those objects relate to one another once that simple click has been made by the salesperson or the BDR. Then when they go ahead towards creating opportunities, we've got to go and look at the products, we've got to go and look at produce the order items and the opportunity products. And then this shows eventually how the products and price book entries all kind of fit together in one simple flow. So it's up to you. This is a very high level diagram. This is how I like to describe things, perhaps to executives or sponsors in a project. And then I might go down to a better level of detail by bringing in the entity relationship diagram boxes into Lucid Charts and starting to define the fields, the foreign keys and relationships, etc. I mentioned earlier that there's a requirement for order data to come into Salesforce, and the customer has decided that they're not going to go down the web services integration route for the actual import of the orders. However, they have a need on the other side to actually get the orders into SAP so that they can produce invoices. Now, there's a couple of options there. You could just integrate the order system with SAP and do it that way. Or there might be further information that you need to collect along the way, such as who is the key contact, what's our current relationship with them, is there any, what's their VAT registration number if you're in Europe, or and if you're in the US, maybe your sales tax, that you might need to collect from Salesforce and then push into SAP in order to produce that invoice. So it might be that there's just a different system of record. If Salesforce is the system of record for customers, then the requirement in this case is to collect that along the way. So here's a basic integration diagram that I put together earlier, which explains how they intend to, or how we intend to position to them how they can integrate this process. So at the moment, they don't have an API in the order processing system. The only way to integrate is to pull data out as a CSV. So we have an individual here, so I put in a symbol for an individual. Notice it's very androgynous. You can't see, whether it's male, female, its ethnicity, its age, anything like that. And that's a key thing to put in your diagrams to make sure that nobody can draw any conclusions or detect any unconscious bias from your diagrams. And potentially risk offending anybody when they read this. We have the CSV file represented here. So I literally went into the shapes section in Lucid Charts and I looked for an image under the microphone, under the magnifying glass, and I typed in CSV, searched the internet, and it came up with a number of symbols that I was happy with. So I saved this one into my own save symbol. So that's a really nice thing you can do in Lucid Charts. So I dropped it into here. Then I found a screenshot of the data loader and I used this to effectively communicate how we are preparing the CSV file. We're pushing it, we're logging in and authenticating to Salesforce through the API, and then we are loading the orders and order items into Salesforce directly. Now on the other side, we have some middleware that's being used in order to transform the data from Salesforce, which may include some customer information as well, and get it into a format that SAP can easily receive. And that's happening outside of Salesforce and outside of SAP. So that's why it's called middleware. And then we're going to produce a sales order with sales order items in SAP, which will then go on to be converted into invoices by the back office teams who use the SAP system. So we have these very high level descriptions ready for somebody to review. Now, how do we tell the whole story without having to show them this and talk them through it? How do we actually make this story very easy to digest? So let's go. Let's start to build this out. So the first part of the story is we have a new lead that comes in, and this lead could be a person that you've met at a conference. It could be a person whose details you've purchased on a mailing list. So for this particular organisation, Unrestricted Receptacles, they've had an inbound expression of interest that's come in from a person. So we're going to pull in our person here. Okay, now the first part of the story, we need to basically label it and say who this person is and what they're doing. So we can label this by effectively saying this is our expression of interest. And it's nice to do this in front of the customer as well, because they can follow along with you as you draw, and they can correct you and validate your solution as you go. And these are just symbols I've picked up and found. There's a nice integration to Google, so you can search for images here. You can search for icons, anything that you need really, and just drag and drop them in. So new lead comes in, and a BDR will then pick that up. So let's find our BDR. Now, this is where you have to be, again, quite careful. So we can say, let's say this person calls in and they speak to a business development representative. Now, we know this is a white lady, but we can find other people, other images of call centre agents if you just type in agent here. Obviously, without getting hold of pictures from the Matrix, you can be very careful about that. But just have a look and see what you can find through here to represent those people. And the more colours you use, obviously I try and avoid using photographs. I try to use icons and symbols because they're a bit easier to follow, but also they make it they do make it more attractive and less confusing for the reader. So we've got our expression of interest. Someone's going to phone up and speak to the BDR, who will then log those details into Salesforce. So I'm going to just build a small arrow, just hover here and connect it to my agent. And then I'm going to move this here to say, now my person has said, I'm interested. So the agent says, okay, that's fine. How do we let's go ahead and qualify that. So I'm going to search for a question mark. And I'm going to say, is this can this be qualified? Is this part of our process? Will this person can we fit this person's need, first of all? So you can either do this with a decision, or you can put symbols in. Just depends on your audience really and the type of diagram that you want to build. If you want to build a business process diagram, you'd obviously put in a decision. So we can say, is this qualified? And if it's not qualified, we just kind of leave it. If it is qualified, then we're going to have this conversion process that takes place. So I'm going to again search for a symbol that could represent a conversion. And if I'm not happy with some of these symbols, then what I might do is in fact, I think I will just add this one in. This is a conversion. And I'm going to say that from this particular part of the process, my user, and I'm just going to copy and paste, this makes it much quicker. My user is going to convert this lead in Salesforce. Okay, so they will then become an account. And for those of you who've worked with Salesforce for a number of years, you'll remember in Classic, there are symbols that go with each object. So I'm going to go for a blue folder that I'm happy with. I like this one. So here is our account. We also know you can produce a contact. So we could effectively put in an image or a shape to represent an individual, which is exactly what I'm going to do here. So, and in fact, what I might do is just copy that, because now that green symbol represents the customer or the prospect. So I want to make sure that that's consistent throughout. So here's my account. And I'm going to paste again and then say this is my contact. And then I'm going to represent my opportunity, which generally, anything to do with opportunities, you would put a monetary figure on it. I am going to search though and see what the search comes up with. Nope. So opportunity didn't come up with anything. I'm going to put money. And here is a nice looking symbol for opportunity that I'm going to use, which is called money. And notice I'm spacing them equally apart because it just looks a bit neater when you do it that way. It is possible, and I'm guilty of it, to get a bit OCD over this, but it pays off in the end. So yeah, so that they're relatively equidistant. So then now I'm looking at something quite linear. I want to kind of neaten it up a little bit. So there's our qualification decision. I'm going to move my conversion down a bit so that it's right smack in the middle. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to show what happens. This does mean I need to move this along a little. So I'm going to link these up. So once it's qualified, I'm going to convert it in Salesforce, and it's going to become an account, it's going to become a contact, and it's going to become an opportunity. So now that this has taken place, I need to put some boundaries in. I need to show this is the point where this is where the boundaries are between people and then what happens in Salesforce. Okay. I also am very aware that I haven't actually logged my lead yet, and it's okay to just kind of skip back and add pieces in that you've missed if you need to. So I'll search for a lead. Nope. I shall use the same symbol again then, and I will say lead created. So the boundaries are quite important here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just link these together first of all so that you've got that idea of process, and then I'm going to add some containers, and containers are really useful for moving things around collectively and drawing boundaries. As you'll see on the integration diagram here, these are all containers. So I'm also going to be a little bit cheeky, and I'm going to copy what I've got in here and I'm going to paste it in here. So at this point, this is where you're reflecting the boundary between what's happening outside of Salesforce and what's happening within Salesforce. So from this point onwards, you know you're in Salesforce. And this is quite a useful way also to recognise where you've got any additional packages within Salesforce that are being used. It's a really useful way to help people understand the boundary. Certainly if you've sold that package as an add-on for Salesforce, your customers will want to know how much of it is native to Salesforce and how much of it is native to the package they're buying, versus how much of it do you have to build in order to produce the entire solution. So these boundaries and containers here are so useful to help you do that. So the next step is that the salesperson will be working that opportunity until the client wants to place an order. So I'm going to use my question mark again. I'm going to say, has the order been placed? And I'm just going to drop it here. And I'm going to take the label as well and say, has the order been placed? Or will they order? Because if you make this as business orientated as possible, they're more likely to understand it when they're looking at it without you there. So I'm going to put a decision, will they order? And if they will order, and I know this is all happy path, we can go in and put the sad path in and the alternatives later on. But from a very simple perspective, this works. So opportunity, will they order? If they will order, then they go and create the order in the other system, and this is where the other boundaries become so important. So I'm going to just copy and paste again another container right here underneath this one to represent the external ordering system. And in fact, it doesn't need to be that big. I'm going to make it a lot smaller. And I'm going to represent that point in the process where the external ordering system comes into play. Okay, so will they order? Yes. So I'm going to find a form image that I like, and I quite like this one. This one's nice. So I'm just going to put that in here, and I'm going to represent that individual placing an order in that system there. And add a little bit of narrative to make it easier. Okay. So now that we have our order, that's all being processed within the external system. So I'm going to say order placed. And then once that order has been placed, obviously they'll go in and they'll select all the different containers that they want, the receptacles that they want to order. So we'll put some boxes against that one to say order is placed, the pricing is derived. Because I know this is outside of Salesforce, but it's still their process. So pricing derived. And even though you don't need to understand what all the bits and bobs that happen in the other system, you just need to understand generally what that individual will be doing. So they're deriving their pricing. So I'll say order form raised, just to make that clearer. Pricing derived, and then they will go through and close win the opportunity. So to represent a win, I might put a trophy down. And then just link that up here and say at this point our opportunity is closed won in Salesforce. Sometimes the lines can really get on your nerves, but it's the same with any tool that you use. Okay, so I want to line that up nicely. And I'm not linking these two together because I want to recognize that they are going to use this other system, and then that information will make its way into Salesforce eventually. So will they order? Yes. I could put this label up here, but that doesn't look neat and consistent. I'm going to make sure all my labels are down at the bottom underneath each symbol. It's completely up to you. You may prefer to put them over the top. I would just think about your audience reading this. So opportunity closed won. Pricing derived, opportunity closed won in Salesforce. And if you're not happy, I like to have my lines straight, so I will give it a bit of a nudge along to make sure it's nice and neat. But in a client situation, I wouldn't necessarily bother on, as long as you've got the information in, and as somebody's speaking, it can be hard to keep up. So I sometimes don't bother neatening things up until I'm away from the client and it's going to go into a document of some kind as an appendix. Okay, so at this point, the order is pricing is derived. He sets the opportunity to closed won when the customer comes back. So actually what I've done is I've not thought far enough ahead. What I'm going to do here is recognize that the order form has been signed. So I'm going to find a picture of a contract. Yeah, so here is my order form, which is signed by the customer. I may even wish to show that customer's contribution, obviously, because you know they're outside the boundaries of the systems, but I might just want to show the actor here. Again, completely up to you. Okay, order form signed, and then the opportunity will be closed won. In Salesforce. The next thing that will happen is once the opportunity has been closed won, we've said that the system needs to automatically update the account type to say that it's a customer now. So all I'm going to do here is just direct the user's gaze towards this opportunity, towards back to the account, to say we will update type to customer. If you want to, you can put in a symbol to say that you're going to create a flow for that. So, and there are various different symbols that you can use. I like this one because it's got colours in it. And you could choose to use that to say this is a process builder or a flow that's going to update that type to customer automatically for you. The next step in the process is the actual upload of the order form data. So then what we need to do here is reflect that that data is going to be extracted in some way into a CSV file. Now I already have a picture of a CSV here, which I'm going to use, and I'm going to use a different colour symbol for a person to represent that they are internal, not external. So note that if you see this green head and shoulders here, that represents the customer, and then you've got this actor here who is the salesperson. Okay. I'm going to use the same actor as I've used in my integration diagram to represent that team that is going to load that data externally. So, obviously I need to label that and make sure it makes sense. So I shall say this is the administrator. Doesn't have to be a system administrator, it could be an office administrator, a finance or order to invoice administrator. So they are basically going to take that order form data, they're going to extract it as a CSV, and then it's going to go to that administrator. I just want to label that to say extracted into a CSV file from that other system. The administrator then takes it, and then I'm going to pull in my data loader picture here, and I'm going to obviously make it a lot smaller because it's very big, and I'm going to represent that CSV being used in the data loader. And then I'm going to show that data being pushed into Salesforce in 2 stages, because the first stage is going to be the creation of the order, and the second stage is going to be the insertion of the order line items. So to represent that, what we need to do, we could just go back to basics and put in a nice bit of schema, which would be easier, or we could actually just refer them to this part here. I mean, in a typical business this is where it becomes a bit of a mishmash of business process flow charts and various other things. So one way you could do it is just say this is a connector and it connects to here. And then actually just reflect that in the other diagram. So that's one way you could do it. And then that leads them to go and check the integration and look for A, and then they get the rest of the idea from that. That would be good practice. However, if they just want to see it all on one screen together, again, like I say, you have different options here. It depends on your personal preference and your audience. So what I want to do here is just actually reflect this data loader piece here. So I'm going to drop that in. And represent that the user is then going to put that into Salesforce. And loads it into the data loader. And then we have our orders. So let's see if we can find some orders. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to use the boxes as an example. So we're going to basically represent that we're creating orders and order products. So I'll use that to represent the orders, the order products, and I will use this to represent the orders themselves. So we say from the data loader, we load in the orders. And then from that data, we need to then take it out again and put it in a CSV, because we're going to use it for, we need to do a bit more manipulation. Because now we have an order ID, we need to put that on our order products preparation spreadsheet as well. So I'm going to reflect that. I'm going to say we take the success file and match it. OCD kicking in. Match order items to order IDs. And then we're going to basically do the same thing again. Now you can either tie this up to the original picture, or you can do it with a new version, which I'm going to do because I don't want it to get too messy. I'm going to load that in. I'm going to extend my container. And then I'm going to put insert order items. Okay. Right, so we now have, and then obviously we've got the checks and so on that go on with that. So at the end of this process, once the data has been loaded in, you then have your analytics part. So I'm going to search for a symbol for charts. There's one here that I really quite like and I want to find. There we go. So we have our reports and dashboards being viewed by our sales manager over here. And this is almost an ongoing thing, really. You have, I mean, there's another option. What I sometimes do is take a screenshot of Salesforce, take a small screenshot of a dashboard and then layer it over the top to say that it's always available throughout the entire process. But in terms of representing the process that we've documented here, what I'm going to do is just add in a recognition that we are running this data and looking at it. So I'm going to put refresh dashboards. And I'm going to put in a small representation of the sales manager. So here she is, and she's refreshing her sandbox. She's not refreshing her sandbox. She's refreshing her dashboards so that she can then go ahead and provide any coaching, make decisions and so on that she needs to do. To finish off this process, once we've got our orders and order items in, I just want to put in a small acknowledgement that we're going to send it to SAP for processing and invoicing. So I'm just going to take the SAP logo, which is in the public domain and you can get to from Lucidcharts. And I'm just going to say that this is all then going to fly into SAP. Now you notice I like to keep my lines quite straight and uniform. In some situations, if I'm representing an integration, then I actually change the style of arrow and make it swirly. And then I actually turn it from being a solid line into a dotted line so that that represents that data flying into SAP. If I want to go one more step further, I can then represent the invoice being produced and sent to the customer. And then everybody's happy. And then, because obviously once the invoice has been raised, we're then in the financial domain. And for my lovely sales manager at Unrestricted Receptacles, he's less interested in what happens then at that stage. He just wants to run his reports. So one last thing to do, just tidy this up. Obviously SAP is outside the boundaries of Salesforce, so I'm going to bring my container in a little bit. And then just as a tidy up, I need to give this a title. So to give this a title, I'm going to take the titles I've already got and use the same formatting. And I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm just going to zoom out because it's easier to see it all. And you see what you've actually built, what has evolved in front of you as you've been going through this. So I can call this the sales process, or sales to be process solution. And then because this is, you can choose lots of different ways that you want to format this. Now, if I'm printing this in an A4 document, then I'm going to set it to A4 and I'm going to tell it to fit to an A4 page. But you can see, because I've set it to portrait, it's squashed it up into a really small size. So I'm going to make it landscape and I'm going to tell it to fit. You do sometimes find with Lucidchart in particular that it does skew up some of your it can screw up some of your arrows, and you have to move them around a little bit just to neaten it up, but it's a small price to pay, I would say. So for this one, to make it easier to see now, I'm just going to convert that back into A3. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to present this to my customer. And at the end of the meeting, I will say, okay, this is where we start. So let's start from the beginning, just to understand what you're wanting to do. So expression of interest from the customer, we create the lead, we qualify the lead, and then it gets converted in Salesforce into those three objects. We then have the opportunity, and then we get to a stage in the sales process where we say, will they order? Yes, the order form is raised in the other system, the pricing is derived and added, and the products added. The order form is then sent to the customer and signed, and then it's extracted and manipulated, ready to go into Salesforce. Meanwhile, the sales opportunity owner is close winning their opportunity. The system is automatically updating the account to customer, so marketing people can identify their customers. We then have the process of loading this data into Salesforce as an order, and we are able to refresh our dashboards and then send those orders into SAP in order to raise the invoice. And it can be something as simple as that just provides a pictorial display of the entire story. And then, so that would go into your spec document alongside your entity relationship diagram. It's always important for all your specs to have those, especially if you're working with developers. And then your integration diagram as well, so that the people who are expected to build these transformations here and the people who are expected to instigate this business process here know how it's going to work and so on. And then you would list all the fields that you're planning to map to one another. So that's the end of the session. Thank you very much for your time in coming to watch this video, and I wish you all the very best for your future diagrams. If you'd like to get in touch, give feedback or ask any questions at all or anything else, then please contact me. I'm quite active on Twitter. I have a Facebook page and a blog, and I'm also available on LinkedIn should you wish to add me there. Just as an extra, what we also have is a Trailblazer community group, which is aimed at helping women feel more confident about taking on the architecture certifications through Salesforce. And this isn't just restricted to ladies, anybody is welcome. So if you would like to come and join us, then we would love to have you. Thank you again for watching, and take care.